قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In Baseerah, we've received a very important question that I hear every other day. So whenever someone comes to me, they always come with the exact same question. And this question needs a lot of detail. The question says, what is the etiquette of interacting with the opposite gender in Islam? And is there anything we need to be aware of? And is there any examples from the Sahaba or from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding interacting with the opposite gender? So, interacting with the opposite gender is a very wide term. And you will not open a book of fiqh and find the word interacting with the opposite gender. You cannot find that in any madhab. Why? Because interacting has many different shapes and forms. Interacting could be living in the same neighborhood. That's interacting. Serving them, cooking them food. That's fine. But because this question needs a detailed answer, I have tried to break it up into 3 or 4 different categories. So the first category is the simplest category, and it is interacting when it comes to touching the opposite gender. So shaking hands and hugging and greeting and physically touching the opposite gender. All 4 schools of thought, Imam Abu Hanifa, the Hanafi madhab and the Maliki madhab, the Shafi'i madhab and the Hanbali madhab, say that it is not permissible to physically touch the skin of the opposite gender without a necessity. So if there's no necessity, you cannot shake hands without gloves on when it comes to the opposite gender. You cannot kiss them on the cheeks or do anything like that. If you have gloves on and there's a barrier, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala does allow shaking hands to be done, although it is disliked and it's better not to do that out of respect. And this is the etiquette of Islam. It has nothing to do with looking down upon the opposite gender, but this is generally the rulings that I mentioned in the fiqh of Islam. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah also allows shaking hands of the opposite gender when people are at a very old age in life and there is no source of temptation that is to be feared or anything like that. The next thing that I want to talk about is looking at the opposite gender. So what can you see from the opposite gender? And we're not talking about the mahram, someone who's related, but we're talking about someone who is not related to you. What can you see from the opposite gender? So once both parties have reached the age of puberty, they're not allowed to see anything from the opposite gender other than what is mentioned, inshallah. So for the sisters, brothers cannot see other than their hands, face and feet, according to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. The rest of the scholars also say that looking at the feet of a sister is not permissible. But regarding hands and face, there's a lot of difference. Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala allows a man to look at the face and hands of another sister if there is no fitna, if there is no temptation, and if he's not worried about feeling anything from looking at her face and hands. Once someone fears that his looking is going to bring him any temptation, then he cannot look anymore. Imam Abu Hanifa, in his madhab, there is also this opinion that Imam Malik mentioned, and then some of the Hanafis put other conditions onto looking at the hands and face. But generally, the Maliki and the Hanafi madhab allow looking at hands and face. In the Shafi'i madhab, we also have 2 opinions. The famous opinion is that you are not allowed to look at the other gender without need. Only when you need to look at the other gender you can. And the other opinion is that you can, as long as there's no temptation. Wallahu a'lam. Now, when it comes to physically touching the opposite gender or looking at the opposite gender, these are two things that we face in everyday life. But there's other things that also can be included in the question, like mixing and being in the same room or the same gathering. Generally, the scholars mention that if you were to be in the same room with the opposite gender, there should be other people in the room. There should be other people in the room. So if it's a small closed-off space and people would think bad of the two genders sitting together, then there must be other people in the room to change that ruling and make it a gathering that is not doubtful or not weird in the way it looks. Now, what about talking to the opposite gender? Talking to the opposite gender is also a matter that has detailed differences in fiqh, but generally, the majority of scholars say that it's better to only talk when you need to talk and not just to chat for no reason, because that could lead to haram. So you're allowed to talk to the opposite gender when there is a need to talk, and it's better to stay away when there is no need to talk. Generally, if you notice what we have mentioned in every one of these categories, you'll find that the general ruling, according to the majority of scholars, is that you need to stay away from anything that can potentially lead to temptation, that can potentially lead to something haram. Once it has the potential to lead to haram, it becomes haram. So it's not only haram to do something when you're sure it's going to cause you temptation or feelings or anything like that, but just that action being doubtful and having the possibility that it will probably lead you to something haram makes it haram according to the majority of scholars. So the advice when it comes to dealing with the opposite gender is to always keep respectful Islamic boundaries. Don't override these boundaries. Don't overlook these boundaries, and keep things professional as much as possible. Once you do that, inshallah ta'ala, you will be safe according to the majority of scholars of Islam, and your interactions will be Islamic. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.